Should I go live Instagram or?
You and the rest need to let me know what to do.
You don't have the thing for the phone?
I'll turn on Do Not Disturb.
Ah, you got it? Wow. Clinical Research Coordinator.
45 to 75.
Or should we go Insta or take? Yeah, we should go Insta. Use this as a studio in the meantime, dude. It's everyone's favorite topics. Are we already rolling? Yeah, we're rolling. Oh. 2025 salaries. That's the topic, guys, so stay tuned. And then if you're watching on Instagram, you're not following me, make sure you follow on Instagram. Occasionally we'll do lives, especially for the cool ones. Or this one I know is going to be a 1 of 10 for sure, because this is a most Googled topic. But it's exploring clinical research jobs, some of the more common clinical research jobs, and their 2025 salary. Now, this is US based, and even within the United States, because the audience is global, but even within the United States, there's a wide variation, and I'm going to give you the ranges. For example, Yuma, Arizona, where I'm at right now, it's on the low end of all this. It's all about supply and demand, but for the same role in Yuma, Arizona versus Los Angeles, California, or Newport Beach, California, or Brooklyn, New York, it's going to be a lot higher of a salary. But there is always a range. And I tell my staff all the time, my coordinators, you're getting paid well for being in Yuma as a coordinator, but you're on the low end of the national average. And actually, we're on the slightly below middle. And we're paying pretty good. Dana, we're paying pretty good, our staff, man. All right, so there's a bunch of positions. I don't think this will cover all of them. There's no way, but some of the most common ones. And if you don't know what clinical research is, to begin with, you need to go watch some of the other videos. There's a short one on what it is. There's a long 4-hour one on what it is. But you got to have an understanding of research. You got to at least know the stakeholders. There's the research sites, there's the CROs, there's the sponsors, and then there's the vendors. And the vendors might be tech companies like Creo, like Patient Ace, or it might be ethics committees, or it might be nonprofit organizations. These are the vendors / support for the main 3 stakeholders, which are sites, CROs, and sponsors. So let's get into the first job. Clinical Research Coordinator. This is the backbone of the industry. Between them and the next one, which is CRA, those are the most popular positions in the field. Obviously, Principal Investigator is another one, although I don't think Principal Investigator is on the list, but I have a topic only for physicians. And it includes Principal Investigator and Medical Monitor and Sub-Investigator, which Medical Monitor actually is on this list. So, all right, here we go. Let's get through this because there's 15 of them. Clinical Research Coordinators. Basically, your responsibility is managing trial participants, collecting data, answering queries, regulatory compliance, recruiting patients. If you're at a site like mine, the coordinator is pretty much a generalist, so they do everything from a study startup to recruiting patients to regulatory to everything, entering data, answering queries. We're trying to work on getting admins in place to where we can streamline some of this stuff. But wherever you are, the range is going to be somewhere from $45,000 a year on the low end to $75,000, and these are all roughly, but this is using 25 sources, and I can put all the links to these sources underneath. I mean, there's Reddit is a source. Let's go through some of these sources. Randstat USA, ACRP Net, ClinEssentials, more Reddit, Clinical Leader. These are reputable sources, whether they're crowdsourced, such as in Reddit, or industry publications like Clinical Leader. This is as accurate and up to date as of 2025 as you can get. ACRP is another source. So I'll have all the sources underneath the video. And whatever range I give you, keep in mind, it's not like strict parameter. This is just rough guidelines. 45,000 to 75,000 a year for a study coordinator. Now I know some study coordinators make more, and that is when they get into higher positions like lead coordinator, or if they even get into things like site director, or if you're a lead coordinator at a really big site network, you probably wear a lot of hats. So I've heard of some coordinators making six figures a year. It just depends. But for the most part, you're looking at that range, $45,000 to $75,000 a year for the study coordinator. For the second position, clinical research associate, so the responsibilities are monitoring trial conduct, ensuring compliance with protocols and GCP. I've done an entire video on what CRAs do. I've broken down like their actual visits. What do they do for a site selection visit? What do they do for a site initiation visit? What do they do for their regular interim monitoring visit? I mean, just if you're not subscribed, please make sure you subscribe and go down the rabbit hole of these videos because they're there. Same thing for the CRCs, and we're going to keep making more because as new tools come out, it's time to make more videos. For CRA, they travel a lot. You're really giving up a lot of your time being home. And it's very misleading when it says home-based position. Because, yeah, CRAs are home-based. But the CROs, at least, the ones that do the bulk of the hiring of the CRAs, they get paid when the CRAs are on site. So at the CROs, the metrics really are days on site for the CRAs. Now, sponsors also hire CRAs. We work with a couple of sponsors that do their own monitoring, and when they use the term home-based, it is more accurate and less misleading than when the CROs say home-based position, because home-based means, yeah, you don't have an office. You work at your house, like this one, but you're on the road 20 days out of the month. So is that really home-based? It's more like hotel-based and airplane-based than home-based. But it's called home-based because you technically don't show up to an office. And like I said, you can be on the road 20 days out of the month. If you work with the sponsors, it's a little less because they don't like to overwork their CROs that much, because the sponsors, they don't get paid for days that a CRA is on site. Sponsors get paid when their drug gets approved. CROs get paid to manage the studies for the sponsors. So CROs get paid whether drugs get approved or not. Topic for a different podcast. The CRAs, typically the salary ranges from $75,000 to $125,000 annually. Again, I've seen less to more. If you get into like contract CRAs, I know contract CRAs that make $200,000 a year. I've known in the past contract CRAs that have made $300,000 a year, but they had zero life. They actually got burnt out. It's not a sustainable line of business to be in, to be a contract CRA making $300K without having other people work for you. Like, you are basically running a small business while doing everything yourself. Not sustainable, but for the most part, the W-2 CRAs, like the non-contractors, or contract to permanent, which is a lot of roles as well. Again, anywhere from 80, maybe 75 on the low end to 150 annually. The official range I'm being given here by Grok 2, which is one of my favorite AIs right now, is between 90 to 125,000, but I lower it and raise it on the low end by 10K, 10 to 15K, more or less, because of what I've seen anecdotally. Clinical trial manager. So these are the CTMs. These are the people who oversee the execution of the trial. So they also include managing the budget and the timelines. They're the ones in charge of the entire study, whether it's at the CRO or the sponsor level, and they're like the boss of the CRA. And CTM, you don't just become a CTM. You usually work your way up from CRC to CRA to CTM, or sometimes from project manager to CTM. Sometimes there's a lot of overlap on the responsibilities between a project manager and a clinical trial manager. But in this case, the responsibilities of the CTM is they're in charge of one study, whereas a project manager may have multiple studies that they're managing at the same time. Although the salaries are basically identical, although there's a caveat to the project manager, which I'll get to. But if you're wondering what the salary is, according to 25 references aggregated as of 2025, the salary for a CTM is $120 to $150K annually. The next role is, and CTMs don't travel as much as CRAs, if at all. They occasionally will travel like to a problem site, or they'll travel if they need to like audit one of their own CRAs, or they'll travel to build good relationships with like maybe a good site or a site network, and they'll travel to investigator meetings and things like that, but much less travel for a CTM. I got to add that part. All right, clinical trial assistant. Now, this is like an admin. Like I was talking about, Yuma Clinical Trials needs an admin. A clinical trial assistant is another term for them, but CTA, that's CTA at a site. An assistant or an admin at a site is different than an assistant or an admin at a CRO or a sponsor. So the salary range here is anywhere from $35,000 a year, because this is an entry-level role at the site level, to $60,000 to $70,000 a year if you're a CTA for a sponsor or a CRO. So they do zero travel, just about. And they are support for the CRA, they're support for the CRC, they're scheduling patients, they're, in our case, in the case of a site, they're entering data. They're not answering queries unless they've been trained on that, but that's getting into more CRC responsibilities. Maybe on the higher end of their salary, as they're preparing to become a CRC, they are starting to answer queries, but they're entering data. They're helping with the support stuff like, hey, we need dry eyes. Hey, we need to schedule this patient. Hey, this patient needs transportation. Hey, this patient needs food. Hey, the office needs toner. Hey, Patient ACE, which is my startup company for patient recruitment. There's leads in there that need to be followed up with. That's what they do at the site level. At the CRO level, they do more of like helping manage the trial master file, helping request or obtain documents from sites that CRAs have requested from the sites. So anywhere from $35,000 to $65,000 annually, depending on what kind of company they work at, and of course, where in the country they work at. Now, data manager. These jobs are increasingly less common in the United States. A lot of them have been outsourced overseas to Latin America, to Europe, but there still are, to India, but there still are data managers in the United States. And so the US equivalent salary, like if you're a data manager in the US, you're probably not working for a site. The site networks at some point will have data managers, but not yet. So you're either working for a sponsor or a CRO, and you are making anywhere from $80,000 to $100,000 annually. But again, these jobs are becoming harder to get in the United States because it is cheaper to get the equivalent service overseas. Don't shoot the messenger. I'm just calling it how I see it with the trends that are going on. Biostats. So a biostatistician, responsible for a statistical analysis of trial data, study design, and data interpretation. These are obviously higher educated roles. $85,000 to $110,000 annually, although I think it does go higher than that potentially. But it's another role that is starting to get outsourced as well because of costs. Project manager. So we talked earlier about clinical trial manager. They're usually in charge of just one study at a time, or maybe a portfolio of studies that are similar. A project manager coordinates multiple clinical projects, and they work in tandem with the CTMs, but they work with multiple clinical trial managers, because remember, one clinical trial manager manages one study, but a project manager manages maybe 8 to 10 studies. And so they work with 8 to 10 different CTMs, probably like 40 to 50 different CRAs, who knows how many sites, but they're responsible for coordinating, managing teams and resources, resource allocation. How many CRAs do we have on this study? Do we need to allocate? Do we need to bring any from this study and move them over here? This study's closing, this study's starting. So from the CRO or sponsor perspective, what kind of personnel do we need to allocate? What kind of budgets? Where are we needing to hire? Where are we needing to let go? This is what project managers do. Clearly, they're in charge of budgets, timelines, and managing multiple teams and multiple projects. Their salary, and this is one of the few roles where if you have project management experience from another industry, you could probably get into project management at a CRO or a sponsor, but they'd probably start you out as a project management assistant. But in your case, like let's say project manager, once you have some experience, $120,000 to $150,000 annually. Next, regulatory affairs specialist. So their responsibilities are ensuring compliance with regulations, preparing submission to regulatory bodies. These are high level positions. These are highly experienced. There's a lot of technical knowledge you need. There's a lot of science knowledge you need. There's a lot of regulatory pathway knowledge that you need. Friend of the show, Robert Goldman, he's excellent at regulatory affairs. He's actually a clinical trial manager. He's actually above that. He's like a portfolio of study director at a sponsor, but he's dabbled with regulatory affairs specialist. Regulatory affairs specialist is $90,000 to $120,000 annually. I actually would argue they go even higher when they're contractors. That's generally the rule for all of these roles, but they go higher when they're contractors, but basically from $90K to $120K annually. And you ensure compliance with the FDA, whatever regulatory entities there are, or the regulatory bodies in your country. Prepare the submissions, get ready for those reviews with the FDA. It's not easy stuff. It's pre-study, during the study, and post-study constant work, and you're probably doing it for multiple studies and a portfolio of studies. $90K to $120K. Safety monitor. So this is someone that monitors adverse events, managing safety reporting. They usually work at sponsors or CROs. They make anywhere from $90,000 to $115,000 annually. And these are not necessarily the medical monitors. That's coming up next. Medical monitors usually have to be physicians. And we're going to get into that. That's the last role. Well, we're almost there. Safety monitors are just one step below them, but they are analyzing serious adverse events, SUSARs, adverse events of special interests, and making sure everything's getting reported properly, managed properly. If you can imagine, like, just running one study with like 40 sites and all the AEs of special interest and all the SAEs and all the SUSARs across a portfolio of the same studies from that IP, you're going to get to a good amount of work, a good amount of paperwork. And so that's the safety monitor. Number 11 is patient recruiter. And these could work either at the site sometimes CRO, but not really, site or tech vendor like Patient Ace, but usually it's a site, and their responsibilities are engaging potential participants, managing enrollment logistics, following up, reminding. They make anywhere from 35,000 to 80,000 a year. Again, depends where, how experienced they are. I think patient recruitment's a good entry level position to get started at a research site, just like clinical trial assistant or admin is. Now, you get some sites where you're lucky, like Yuma Clinical Trials, where we hire our coordinators entry level, but we usually put them with the tasks of being an admin first or being a patient recruiter first. Like in the case of Lana, who works for us, she's like our lead patient recruiter for the site, but she's also a coordinator. So anywhere from 35,000 to start out to 80,000 plus. This one has the biggest range, and this one is really the biggest range because it's what have you actually done? Like, what can you actually prove that you've done? Like, before you, how many patients were scheduled versus after you. Number 12, clinical research nurse. So this is patient care. This is administering treatments and ensuring participant safety in trials. It could be a sub-investigator as well, like Jaime Valles. Jaime, my business partner, he's a nurse practitioner. He's a clinical research nurse, although we call them sub-investigators. But you can be a clinical research nurse and not be a sub-investigator. The salaries are anywhere from $75,000 to $100,000 annually. Research billing expert. This is something that is an interesting role. It's clearly highly specialized. My group DSCS with Chris Auber, we just hired someone to do this part-time for us. And I can tell you this is probably spot on. It's $70,000 to $95,000 annually. What they're doing is managing billing compliance for the sites, ensuring correct financial documentation, making sure you're not missing any invoices if you're a site. If you're the sponsor or CRO, you're on the flip side, making sure that they're sending supporting documentation. You're making sure that the budgets and contracts are being negotiated properly and that you're not missing much. Again, $70,000 to $95,000 annually. Line manager. This is working at a CRO, usually, sometimes a sponsor, and they're overseeing a team of CRAs or clinical trial assistants, and they're doing performance management, performance reviews. Remember how I told you with the CRAs, their key performance indicators are how many days on site have you been, especially at the CRO level. Well, these line managers are there to help talk to the CRAs or the CTAs about their own key performance indicators, and also if they're behind on their metrics, how to get ahead, or if they are ahead, how to keep doing what they're doing, and also nurturing them into future roles, preferably within the organization, but sometimes it doesn't always work out that way. But that's what line managers does. It's not really human resources, but it's like the ally internally for a CRA or a CTA is the line manager. Their role, and these are like experienced CRAs that do this. This is like a reward position for a CRA that's put in their work. It's anywhere from $110,000 to $140,000 annually. And finally, last position on this list, although there's plenty more, medical monitor. This is usually a MD or a DO. Sometimes it could be an international medical graduate, but that's not the norm, but it can be. Medical oversight of trials, reviewing data, participant safety. I know as sites, we contact our medical monitors a lot that usually work at the sponsor or the CRO. When we have a patient that we have a question about, well, we don't know if they actually qualify. The protocol is a little bit ambiguous when it comes to this particular inclusion criteria. Can you help us understand? The medical monitor will basically discuss with the site or with the PI, hey, we don't think this patient's a good fit, or yes, we do, that's fine. They're pretty much like the medical oversight from the sponsor or CRO perspective for a particular study. And it's $130,000 to $170,000 annually, although I've seen way higher than that as well. But generally not lower than 130. So I think this is pretty accurate. 130 to, let's say, 190 annually is what I've seen. So that's the 15 positions that I've come up with, and 15 job profiles in clinical research with 2025 salary data. We'll put links to all this stuff underneath. Knock yourselves out. Like, subscribe, comment, share. Bye-bye. Hey, if you guys like that kind of content, make sure you like, subscribe, comment, share. Stay tuned for more videos.